Hey guys, Damon at Black Warrior Lures. Book review. My favorite fishing book of all time. You know, I love bluegill fishing. I love catfishing, but guess what? A great way to catch catfish is to learn how to catch bluegill because bluegill is bait. And I bought this book. When was this thing published? Let's see. Wow, 1999. Doesn't seem like it was that long ago. But anyway, Terry and Roxanne Wilson, I think they're professional fly fishing teachers and guides and things like that. And they wrote a book called Bluegill. What does it say? Bluegill, fly fishing and flies. Now, don't let that fool you. I mean, you guys know I love fishing with black soldier flies and live bait and those sorts of things. The principles are the same. Doesn't matter that it's a lure. How do you catch fish? You put bait, lure, whatever it is, in front of their face during a time which they're feeding, you'll catch them. Doesn't matter if it's an artificial or live bait or dead bait. It's just how it works. So here's let me read the table of contents to you. Let's flip open here. Yeah, the chapter one is, well, you got forward introduction. Chapter one, beautiful vibrations, which I think is a cute little story. They took some kid fishing who loved that, just that thump, thump, thump that bluegill give on the rod, especially a long limber fly rod. And it's a great story. But here we have gearing up, gearing up chapter, which and the Bully's Bluegill Spider, which is a fly they invented, and the complete fly box, choosing the right water, you know, the Bluegill Spring, the Bluegill Summer, as the water cools, effective presentations, putting the pieces together. It's a very short book, uh, you know, precious little book. And this book has really made my bluegill fishing go through the roof. And even though I'm using the live baits and all that kind of stuff, and I'm not even using fly rods anymore, the principles are the same. You guys have remember me talk about, you see how I talk about drifting for bluegill a lot? Let's see. Yeah, effective presentations. Did I say that? Let's see here. See, I can miss that. Yeah, effective presentations. I actually don't remember saying that. Yeah. So there's a whole section here. You may not be able to see it. But there's a whole section here on back trolling. All right, back trolling, and that's it. Pretty much what he describes here is almost exactly what I do in terms of my drifting and things. Except I'm using oars and I'm not doing back trolling. I'm just drifting the line through the water. I mean, it's basically drift fishing, except he's calling it back trolling, and that's maybe the way he does it and what works better from him in his waters. I love this picture here. This there's the book's black and white, but there's this middle section with lots of color pictures, and this you mean these color pictures here show you the incomplete spread of flies that he ties for bluegill. The first one is their bully bluegill spider. But if you look, there's a lot of classic flies here, like your nymphs, your streamers, terrestrials, worms, and crayfish. So many of these flies are just based on actual real bugs and worms and various things like that. So all you really have to do is look at that and understand what bug or worm really most represents sort of all these, and that's why I like the black soldier fly, right? Because it pretty much it's a terrestrial. It looks like a nymph. It acts like some of these dry flies. It can pretty much, that black soldier fly pretty much mimics all that. All right, other than maybe say like the bait fish. But once you put the tandem tip rig that I recommend, it just covers it, right? That entire thing. That's one of the reasons why I think it works so well, the tip rigs. But and they're fly tying recipes for all those, which is great. Now let's go back to the gear page, because that's usually in almost any fishing book. It's the gear, right? You want what gear do I need to buy, right? At least that's how I am. It may be different for you, but so beautiful vibrations. Yeah, gearing up. Let's see, get a little closer here. Rods, fishing rods. Yeah, here, obviously he's talking about fly rods, but you don't have to restrict yourself to only fly fishing for bluegill. I'm gonna raise this up a little bit. Um, you don't have to restrict yourself to just bluegill. Fly rods made from fiberglass and bamboo can perform acceptably. Fiberglass rods are durable and inexpensive, but quite heavy. Bamboo rods are also heavy and may be prohibitively expensive. Modern rods constructed of lightweight graphite are far superior to casting and fishing tools, and are available in a wide variety of price range. Now, the truth be told is, if you make them yourself like I do, the price just doesn't really matter. All right, but I prefer fiberglass. But I'm not opposed to graphite either. I mean, just pick whatever you want. But for bluegill, I would much rather have fiberglass because it's so tough. But as far as rods, let's see here. Check this out. Seriously, the beginning bluegill fly fisher is best advised to purchase an 8 to 9 foot rod designed to carry 6 or 7 weight line. Now that really is something else, because a lot of if you go to anywhere like bigbluegill.com or anywhere where you have a lot of serious bluegill fishermen fishing with fly rods, most of them are going smaller, lighter, ultralight. They're using 2-weight fly rods and trying to go down from that. And while there's nothing wrong with that, it's amazing that they recommend a 6-7 weight fly rod for bluegill, right? A lot of people would think that that's too heavy for bluegill, and I'm finding it isn't. I have a 7 weight as my a 7 weight is basically my standard fly rod blank that I use for any kind of lightweight fishing, and I'll just run, and I'm running 8-pound line, but I'm doing a lot of drifting. A lot of drifting and trolling. So I need line and a rod that's going to be sort of constantly bent over, right? And when the line gets, I'm coming down with a little cold or something, I don't know. But when the line gets hooked up, when the line gets tangled or snagged, I got to have enough strength in the line to be able to pull it free, because the slinky weights I use, and because I have so much line out behind the boat, a lot of what happens is the hang-ups are just little snags and not very serious. And with any moderate force, it will just come free. And so I got to have a rod. If I'm just doing this with a 2-weight rod, you'll just snap the little 2-weight rod in half. And I'm just running, say, 4-pound line, I'll just snap that in half. So I need stronger rod, stronger line to deal with drifting. And anytime you're dealing with drifting and trolling, you just need a little bit beefier gear just for that purpose. And we're just talking about bluegill here, right? So, and that's why this rod that you see me build can handle catfish or light catfish rods. That's about as heavy a fish as you can catch, or some very small panfish to medium small size catfish, which make great table fare. But anyway, that's why you see that. And he goes through rods, he goes through reels, fly lines, tippet materials, leaders, those sorts of things. But for the guy like me who's using traditional tackle, spinning gear, monofilament lines, just those sorts of things, you can learn a lot from this. You can see, okay, I forget how the tippet sizes work here, but you can use a very light tippet, or you can use something. He has from 0x to 7x tippets here. Yep, and I forget exactly how that works, but so he goes through all these sorts of things, even down to the kinds of boats. There's a section on here on using float tubes, canoes. He calls bluegill boats. Let's see. I may read a little bit of this. uh, the most coveted boat style is called a bass boat. With its exceptionally stable casting platform, it could have been designed by a fly fisherman because every high tech gadget has been incorporated into the design of these big tackle monsters is as useful to the fly rod wielding bluegill chaser as the ardent basser. Okay, ordinary aluminum boats. You've seen what I have, right? Ordinary aluminum boats may be inexpensively customized by adding plywood, platforms, carpeting, and padded swivel seats. Just as in selecting a piece of equipment, one needs to realistically assess the uses for the boat. Yada yada yada. So that's the kind of thing is that I just love the concept that you're not restricted. You don't have to have a lot of expensive gear to do any kind of fishing. I'm running a 12-foot bass John boat, and I'm right up there below the dam with all the guys with their big bass boats, and I'm catching them just as well as they do, and in a lot of ways even more because they're just casting and flipping and all the kinds of things, and I'm just dragging and trolling, and I'm just right there in front of their face a lot of times just catching them, and they're casting into the same water and not catching anything, and I just have two rods out the boat drifting down, and I'm just hooking up, and and they're just they're just sit there looking, and eventually they just leave because they just get frustrated that here's this guy in this go-kart boat motor and this cheap aluminum boat just dragging bait behind the boat, out fishing us with these big expensive tournament style setups. Well, the question is always, do you want to look cool or do you want to catch fish? I mean, ask yourself that question. Most people, they just want to look cool. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't care about looking cool. I care about catching fish. I care about filling the cooler there with fish. I don't care about looking cool. So that's a decision you have to make. If you want to look cool, that's fine. If you want to catch fish, consider other methods. But anyway, but anyway, there's some good photography in there. It's a classic sort of fly fishing type of book. But if you the most valuable stuff, the most valuable part of the book are the choosing the water, choosing the right kind of water. He goes through all the major types of water, natural lakes, impoundments, which is what I have to deal with. Recognizing systems that produce bluegill factories. And I found that one of the lakes I fished was really the river. They call it Holt Lake around these parts, but it's excellent bluegill waters. And when you actually look at the factors here, it all matches up. So, you know. Now, he talks about abundant shallow water, things like that. Well, I'm finding all my big bluegill are coming out of the deep water, not in the shallow waters. It's you see me out there in the middle of the river channel in this incredibly clear, what would be not necessarily nutrient rich water, but I'm catching these big bluegill because there's lots of crawfish and things like that down in the rocks for them to eat, and that's where they're hanging out. And that's where I'm finding them. So whenever you read a book like this, you have to understand this person comes from a certain background. They have a certain life experience, and they're going to teach from that basis. That may not have anything to do with what you need and where you are. So you always have to sort of filter through, read what they have to say, and don't really pass any judgment. Just read what they have to say, and then read it again to begin to understand why are they saying it. Then you read it again to understand how do I apply this in my circumstance. And so that's how you basically read any book. Sorry, I'm just sort of sniffing and coming down with something. Oxbow lakes, ponds, bayous, moving water, marshes and swamps. And I've seen some big bluegill caught in a lot of marshes and swamps. Moving water basically means river. Now, the curious thing about my waters is that it sometimes it acts like a river, sometimes it acts like a lake, and you have to almost have both those things in your arsenal to effectively fish it. Um, that it's just a weird thing. So we all have our own waters. Okay, another one: coal strip mine pits, phosphate strip pits, canals, home waters. And I think this is the most valuable piece of advice for any fishing. Let's see if I can find the part here. No, I can't find it right offhand. In other words, well, I have some notes here I did at the end of the chapter. Focus on one body of water. In a large lake, focus on one section of water. Fish this body of water, section of water, for 1 calendar year and all its seasons in different kinds of weather and conditions. This will multiply your knowledge, And that's exactly what you're seeing me do with how I fish out there on the river. I'm only fishing one section. I'm only fishing a little bit. You don't see me running up and down the river long ways. I'm not running and gunning. I get to a section of river and I thoroughly fish it via drift and trolling techniques. And that's it. That's the most valuable piece of advice I think that's in this book. Other than springtime for the bluegill, I need to reread that. It's just a lot like the in-fisherman stuff, the pre-spawn period, the spawn, and then he goes through, the summertime, into the end of the spawn, the bluegill summer, and those sorts of things. And he shows you how to deal with choosing natural baits. Yeah, and all those kinds of things. And then he goes through various presentations where I talked about the back trolling techniques, and it wasn't until after I had started trolling and drifting that I said, "Wait a minute, let's go pick up this book and see if he even talks about trolling or drifting." And sure enough, he calls it back trolling, and it's verbatim, almost exactly how I've gone about catching these big bluegills in my big impoundment waters here on the Black Warrior River. So if you're looking for a good book that's going to help you actually catch bait, or if you just love catching big bluegill, I'd recommend you get this one. I may put the link to my Amazon thing there in the description. I'll have a little commission off that. If I don't even know if this book's still in print. I love the book, but I'll see if it's on Amazon. And if you really are interested in it, just check that out. And hey, I will talk to you guys later.